In a previous lesson, you saw how to use the group by and ag methods to get summary statistics per group in Pandas. In this lesson, we're going to look at other grouped operations in Pandas. Let's get started. So I have my Graph Courses Python folder open here in VS Code, and I'm going to make a new script, and I'll call it Pandas Grouped Operations.qmd. And I've pasted in the learning objectives. If you want, you can pause the video and read through these, but we'll come back to them at the end of the video. Let's make a new section and call it Imports. And we're going to import our libraries. We're going to use Pandas, of course, as PD. We're going to use Vega datasets as VD. We're going to use Plotly Express, plotly.express as PX. And then we'll also import warnings and calendar just for some quick setting. And now let's make a new section and call it Data. And we're going to extract and modify the data that we'll be using today. So we're going to use the Seattle weather data that comes from Vega datasets. You can extract it with vd.data.seattle weather. And as you can see, each row corresponds to a specific date. And you have precipitation, which is rain or snow, temperature, wind, and the weather classification. We're going to do a little bit of modifications on it to make it nice for our tutorial. So first, let's assign this to an object called weather raw. And then from that, we're going to extract just the 2012 information. So I put the query method there, and then in quotes, I'm going to type date.dt.year equals 2012. So what we're doing is we're grabbing this date column here, and we're using the dt method on it to extract the year. And we're checking for those that are equal to 2012. Let's store that as just weather. And then the last thing we're going to do is create a month column. So let's type weather and then month. And we're going to set that to pd.categorical. So we haven't quite learned this yet, but this is a way to create categorical columns. And then within here, I'm going to type weather, and I'm going to grab the date. And then I'm going to use dt.strftime. So that is going to format it. And we'll format it just as a month with this symbol here. Again, you don't have to understand what I'm writing. Categories, we'll set that to the following list. Calendar.monthName. And this will give us a list of the months in the year. And we're going to extract from this element all the way to the end. So for that, I'm just going to type 1 colon. So this will go from 1 till the end. And finally, we set ordered equal to true. And that should be all we need. So let's print the weather data finally and see what that looks like. So now we have added a column to the right here that has the month for each day. And we filtered to just 2012. So it goes from January of 2012 all the way to the end of 2012. Next, let's make a new section and call it Adding Summary Statistics with the transform method. So in a previous lesson, you saw how to add summary statistics like mean and median using group by and ag. Let's quickly recall how we can do that. So here we're going to try to get the mean of precipitation. Precipitation, like I mentioned, is rain or snow. And we're going to try to get the mean of that using group by and ag per each month. So I run weather.groupby. And let's group it by that month variable that we just created. Then we tag on ag, and we supply mean precip equals. Then we have this tuple in there that will accept the name of the column we want to apply on, precipitation, and the name of the summary function, in this case mean. Okay, so now we have the mean precipitation for each month. But as you can see, this is a summary data frame. And instead of creating this summary data frame, what we may be interested in sometimes is adding that mean as a new column on this data set. And unfortunately, there's no easy way to do that using this ag output here. We can't assign this to a new column in our original data frame. So this is where transform comes in handy. So let's see how we can use transform to add this summary to the data frame. So for this, I'll create a new variable in my data set, and let's call it maybe mean precipitation, mean precip per month. And I'm going to set that equal to weather.groupby month. And then after that, I extract the precipitation column, just the precipitation column, and apply the following transform on it. And the argument that transform accepts is some kind of summary function. So there I can write the mean. And so now if I run this, I'll get some warning messages, which we'll talk about later. But we have successfully added in that new column. So let's take a look at it. So if I look at the weather data now, you see that you have the mean precipitation for each month. And let's view it with our variable viewer in VS Code so that we can see it a bit more clearly. So over here now, And maybe I'll zoom out just a little bit so I can fit more information on the screen. So you can see now mean precipitation month. And for all of January, we have just one mean precipitation, 5.59. Then for February, we have a different one, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, we can calculate other summary statistics in a similar way. So instead of mean, maybe we want to calculate the median for each month. So let's do that. The median rain or precipitation for each month. And we can add that in. And so there now you see the median precipitation in each month. Or maybe you want to add in the sum for each month. That could also be a very useful statistic. So let's add that as well. So sum of precipitation each month. We just change our statistics there and there. And let's print weather to take a look at that. And with the sum in hand, it could be useful to see what proportion of that month's rain fell in a particular day. So we got 173 millimeters in January. So I could quickly calculate what percentage is this of that, obviously 0. And then what percentage is 10.9 of that, and so on. So let's quickly do that. We can run weather, and I'll call the new variable precip month prop. And that is just going to be the precipitation for each month. So weather, and then precipitation, let's copy that, over this sum that we just created. And maybe we can do it as a percentage so it's easier to interpret. So precip month percentage, and we just multiply it by 100 times. And let's run that and take a look again at our weather data set. And you can see now the percentage of rain for that month that fell in each day. So this could be a very useful thing to know. Okay, now let's quickly talk about these warnings that we keep getting. So let me run this previous cell to look at both warnings. So let's take the second warning, setting with copy warning. I think I have mentioned this before. So this is a warning that sometimes comes up when you make manipulations on the result of a query. And you can silence that warning by typing in the following option, pd.options.mode.copy on write, copy on write, with underscores between that, and set that to true. And let's run this cell. And I believe that should fix that issue. And so now we just have this future warning, which to be honest is not super important. It has to do with how group by treats missing values. You could silence the warning by setting here, comma, observed equals false, and that will get rid of the warning. But that's not really necessary in our case, and it will just make our code a bit hard to read. So what I recommend is you can just ignore that warning, or if you want, you can silence warnings in general by just running the following code, warnings.filter warnings, and then open that as a function and set the arguments to be ignore as a string. Okay, so this will just ignore future warnings so that we don't have to deal with them. And now we should get a clean output. Now here is a practice question for you. You're going to calculate the daily tip proportions using this tips dataset. So let me remind you that the tips dataset is information on tips collected by a waiter in the United States. And it was on 4 days, I think Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which you can see in this day column over here. And so what you're going to do is use the transform workflow that we showed you. So add another column here with the total tips for each day. And then you create a new column called tip proportion that shows what proportion of that day's total tips came from each customer. And here's what the first few rows of your raw output will look like. So you can quickly check whether you're on the right track. So pause the video and try this out. Okay, before we go to the next section, let's quickly reinitialize our weather data frame because we've added many different columns to it. Let's subset it back to just a few columns: date, month, precipitation, wind, and weather. And now let's look at our new section on counting values. So counting values within groups using the value counts method. Okay? So let's quickly remind ourselves of what the value counts method does. So if we take the weather variable from this weather data frame that describes the type of weather, rain, drizzle, or dry, or whatever, we can call the value counts method on that, and that returns the number of each type of weather, 191 days of rain, 118 days of sun, and so on. And you can also set normalize equals true in order to get the proportions from that. So normalize equals true will give us these as proportions. So what if we want to know within January, what are these proportions? Within February, what are the proportions, and so on? There's a nice way we can do that. We can just tag on value counts after group by. So let's look at the grouped version. And here we're just going to group by month. So let's say weather.group by, and let's group by that month variable. And then after we've done the group by, then we just do the rest of all of this. So we tag on weather.valueCounts. And now we're going to have for each month the number of each type of weather. And we can also set that to normalize equals true as well. Let me copy that. Normalize equals true. Just paste it over here. And now we have the proportions for each day. As you can see, this is no longer a data frame. This is a hierarchical series. So to set it back to a data frame, you can just tag on the reset index method. So reset index will turn that back into a regular data frame. Let's do that here as well. Reset index. And you may notice that my data frame is printing out many rows. Probably yours doesn't print out this many rows. You can change the number of rows printed by just setting the following option. Let's set it up here. pd.options.display.max_rows. And here you can set the maximum number of rows. In this case, let's just put it at something high like 40. Okay, now here's another practice question for you. So using the tips dataset, you want to count the number of smokers and non-smokers that came in each day. So here again is that tips dataset, and you have the smoker column. So you want to count per day how many smokers came in and how many non-smokers. Pause the video and try this out. Now let's make another section and call it cumulative sums. Cumulative sums. So this is an operation that is often useful for your data analysis. And we're going to see an example where we try to calculate the cumulative rain or cumulative precipitation per month in the weather dataset. So first, let's see how we can calculate a general cumulative sum. So I'm going to type weather and then precipitation, the column. And then I grab the cumsum method here. And what that does is for each day, it's gradually adding up the total amount of rain for that day and stacking it up until you get a cumulative total of 1226 millimeters. So that's the total amount of rain in the whole year. And so if we want to get it per month, all we need to do is just tag on group by here. And we group by that month variable that we created, month. And if we call this, we'll now have the monthly cumulative totals. So you may not see it very nicely here, but it is reinitiating at the start of each month. Let's store this now in a new column. We can call that column percip cumul maybe, and set that equal to this output. And then let's view that in our data viewer. So now you can see that for the percip cumul variable, we are gradually adding up the total rain in each day. And then we keep growing up until we get to February, and then we start again, and all the way up to March, and then we start again. So this is a cumulative sum. So that is a pretty simple concept. Here is a practice question for you on that. You're going to use the tips dataset, and I've helped you sort it by day here. And you're going to get cumulative sums of the tips that the person receives in each day, and also the total bill. And here is an example output from the first few rows of your answer. So pause the video and try that out. And now let's go through our list of learning objectives. So by now you should know how to add group level summary statistics as new columns using transform. You should know how to count values within groups using value counts. And you should know how to compute cumulative sums as well within groups. So these are a few grouped operations that should come in handy for your data manipulation. For now, I'll sign off and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
For more resources, visit our website where you can track your progress, access interactive quizzes and lesson notes, and connect with our teachers and other learners like you. And if you'd like a more guided experience, we also offer live online bootcamps with expert help. So join us at thegraphcourses.org to start your learning journey today.